You know, 2 Corinthians 10, 11 and 12 tell us that these stories in the Old Testament are for our benefit because we're going to be tempted to violate them. Lest we fall, which I did. As I grew up as a young man in high school, I used to look around and I tried to figure out, well, what's the goal in life now? What's the purpose here? And of course, I went to Sunday school every Sunday, but I finally figured out that it looked to me like the idea was to get an education so that you could become a successful a doctor, a lawyer, businessman, or whatever, but the goal was money and success. And so I thought, well, I ought to get a head start. And so I began to read all these books in high school on Think and Grow Rich, and positive mental attitude, and how to win friends and influence people so that you can sell them something. And I even made up a little card index file, a 3x5 cards, and I would go down the hall at high school, and I would be sure and speak to everybody, you know, and hi. And I want them to remember me when I came back years later to sell them something. And I would write their name on this 3x5 card. And I'd try to remember something about them so I could recall it in the days to come. See, my father sold life insurance, and I thought, like a lot of young men do, I'll grow up and sell life insurance too. So I started my prospect file early. Well, as time went by, I got into college, and I decided I needed to set a goal. And so I did. I said by the age 30, I wanted to be financially independent. Well, while I was in college, I met my precious wife, Faye, and we got married. I got a job with a man in the real estate business, and I worked for him. He was a real estate developer. And in this particular job I had, it was mainly a desk job, and I had a lot of free time, and we were newlyweds, and I'd saved up $1,000. And so I began to play the stock market. And I got a stockbroker, and my brother was helping me. He was selling bonds and stocks for a bank, and he would give me these tips that he would get from this fellow we call the Source. I never did know who he was. But so I would took this $1,000 and I put it in these stocks, and with my positive mental attitude was waiting to get rich, and all of a sudden it doubled, it tripled. So I didn't know what to do, and I thought, well, if you're going to get rich, everybody who's rich must have a banker because you got to borrow money. So I took my stock down to the local bank and walked in and said, I want to meet the president. Well, they took me in and met him and said, listen, I got this stock. It's worth $3,000. I want to borrow money. I don't know how it works. How does it work? He said, well, you give us that stock and sign a note, and we loan you the money. Great. He gave me the money, and I put that in the stock market, and it went up. And so I went back and forth to the banker till one day I was sitting back in my chair at the office like Nebuchadnezzar, counting, looking at the stocks, counting up the money, because that $1,000 had been run into tens of thousands of dollars. And I remember sitting there thinking, this is easier than I thought. All I got to do is have a positive mental attitude, borrow money, get in the stock market. I got it made. And as I was walking on my roof, so to speak, all of a sudden the phone rang. I answered the phone. It was my stockbroker. He said, Jim, something's happening. Your stocks have started to drop. I said, what do you mean drop? I thought they've just been going up. He said, well, they're taking about a 10 or 15% drop. We're in a real tough time here. But don't sell. Just hang on. They'll come back. I said, all right, I'll listen to you. A week later, he called back, and he said, Jim, they're dropping more. He said, you've lost about 30 or 40%. I said, listen, I can't lose 30 or 40%. What do I do? And he said, Jim, this is getting bad. But he said, now, don't worry, because remember that everything that goes down must come up. I said, no, wait a minute, that's not the way I understood it. He said, yeah, I know what you're talking about. But he said, in the stock market, they always come back. He said, remember the Great Depression? Eventually they came back. And I thought, Great Depression? Well, it was like a Great Depression to me, because eventually some of those companies went bankrupt. One day he called to tell me I had little or nothing left. Well, somebody else had been watching those stocks because the banker called. He said, Jim, you have no collateral against these huge loans. You need to come down here and pay on these loans. I said, sir, I can't pay. Don't tell me you can't pay, Jim. You're going to get me in trouble now. I went out on a limb with you. You seem like a nice young man. I could trust you. You got to do something. He began to put pressure on me. Like Nebuchadnezzar, I was turned out to eat grass. I felt like I was eating grass because strange things began to happen to me. I couldn't sleep at nights. I lay there and I worried and anxious about the money I owed. I couldn't eat. Faye would fix a delicious meal, and I'd sit there and I'd look at it and push it away. I couldn't eat. My stomach was in a knot. And all of a sudden, I began to break out in hives. And my lip would swell out, and my eye would swell up, and all these bumps all over me. And I remember one day I went out to sell a piece of real estate to a client because I needed to get some commissions. I needed to pay on these notes. And I was very nervous and tense about making this sale. And I was sitting there making this presentation and telling him about this property and showing him where it was. And all of a sudden, I felt it coming on me. My lip started swelling up. My eye started swelling shut. And I remember I glanced up at this fella, and he looked at me. Jim, what's the matter with you? I remember I just folded my papers up. I said, I'll be all right. And I walked out, and I got in the car. And as I was driving back to the office, I cried out to God, oh, God, I can't sleep. I can't eat. I can't even call on clients. Well, one night, in the middle of the night, because I wasn't sleeping well, about 3 o'clock in the morning, as I was sitting on the edge of the bed, I remember the moon's shadow had caught the window there, and it was up against the wall, and I was staring at it. And I began to wonder, God, is life even worth living anymore? And all of a sudden, I got an idea. And I jumped up, ran downstairs, turned on the light, got a pad and a pencil, and I began to figure. Because you see, Faye was teaching school. And I thought, how many years would she need to work and us apply her salary to the debt? How long would it take to get out of debt? And I began to figure, much to my shock, it would take 120 years. And I knew she'd never stand still for that. And besides that, God didn't want me thinking like that, because He allowed Faye to become pregnant with our first child right then, and she had to quit teaching school. And there I was, right where God wanted me. I had no way out. I went to the office that morning, and I remember thinking, here I am, 29 years old, 1 year from reaching my goal of financial independence. Instead, I'm on the verge of filing bankruptcy and spending the rest of my life paying those debts. Well, that Sunday, as we went to Sunday school, our Sunday school teacher came in. He was all excited. He said, I'm going to put the regular lesson aside. And he pushed it aside. And he said, I want to tell you about this seminar. And he began to talk about the Institute and basic youth conflicts. In fact, I began to think he turned into a fanatic. That's all he talked about the whole hour. And I remember I was sitting on the back row, and this was a newlywed class. And this was our last Sunday there. This was in Dallas, Texas, and we lived in Fort Worth, Texas. And so we drove across the turnpike every Sunday. We decided that this 1 year in the married newlywed class had been very good for us, but we needed to find a church over closer to our home. So this was the last Sunday, and as I sat in the back row, I thought, boy, I can't wait for him to get through, trying to push us into this seminar. Well, I got out of the Sunday school class and left and never thought any more about this seminar. I thought to myself, who needs a religious seminar? I need money. So about a couple of months later, and about 3 or 4 weeks before the seminar was coming to Dallas, Faye and I happened to be in Dallas. And we were in a large mall there shopping, and we ran into who else but our Sunday school teachers. And they came over and they said, Jim and Faye, did you sign up for the seminar? And I started backpedaling. No, listen, we didn't sign up for that seminar. And I gave them the typical excuses. I said, look, it costs $55, and we need all the money we can get right now. And besides that, it's Institute and Basic Youth Conflicts. And I don't have any youth conflicts. I got adult conflicts. And then I thought to myself, I don't need a week-long religious seminar. I need to find another banker that can loan me some more money so I can pay the other banker. But they kept pressuring us. So finally I said, yeah, we'll go. And so we left. And I remember in the car on the way back across the turnpike to Fort Worth, I said to Faye, I said, honey, it looks like we're going to have to go, but look, why don't we have a plan? Now, I got to admit, she didn't make up this plan. I did it. I said, honey, I'll go Monday night and you can stay home. We'll skip Tuesday night. And Wednesday night, you go and I'll stay home. And Thursday night, we'll both go. And each time one of us go, be sure and say hello. Seek out the Sunday school teacher in the crowd and say hello so they'll know we came. But I said, Faye, I don't want to ruin our weekend and go Friday and Saturday. So she said, well, whatever you say, Jim. So Monday night I went. And I sat there, and big crowd there, a pretty good-sized crowd. And I waited for the, I don't know what I was waiting for. I guess I was waiting for the choir to come out, I didn't know what. Well, nothing happened. Nobody came out. Till finally a very unassuming fella in a dark blue suit came walking out and came up, and I thought, well, this guy's probably going to dust off the podium and arrange the papers for the main speaker. Much to my amazement, he was the main speaker. And you know it, Bill Gothard. And so he began to talk, and in his monotone voice, I sat back and I thought, boy, this is going to be boring for 3 hours tonight. And as he began talking, he began explaining a principle of life that I'd violated. I didn't know it was one of God's principles. And all of a sudden, he said, let's bow for prayer. And I thought it had been about 5 minutes. I looked at my watch, and 3 hours had gone by. And God so convicted me, and I went home, and I woke Faye up, and I said, Faye, this guy is teaching something I've never heard before. Faye, it's fascinating. This man's told me some problems I got in my own life and how to apply God's ways and have answers. I said, why don't we both go tomorrow night? Maybe it won't be good the second time, and we'll just go back to our own plan. Second night, we both went. And again, Tuesday night, God mightily broke me with another principle of life that I was violating. Well, to make a long story short, by Thursday night, literally wild horses couldn't have dragged me away. By Saturday night, when he dismissed us, I couldn't get out of the chair, tears streaming down my cheeks. As I sat there and I said, God, you do have principles for us to live by. I thought you were just a God because I have salvation in you. I'd go to heaven one day, but I didn't know I was supposed to walk with you in these ways. Well, I did finally get up, and we went home and still had all my problems. And so I remember saying to Faye, Faye, honey, where should we start? What do we do? She said, well, Jim, why don't we begin by applying one of the principles? Why don't you go ask your father for his counsel on what we should do? I said, well, I haven't done that in years. You see, the problem was, or the situation was that my boss in the real estate business had said, Jim, I want you to move back over here to Dallas, and I want you to manage another property development for me. But yet God had been prompting me in my heart to start a real estate firm, a commercial real estate firm there in our city. And so I didn't know what to do. If I left the city, the banker would think I was running away. If I took this move over to Dallas, yet I wanted to follow what I thought was God's best, but how would I start a company in debt? So I called my father and I said, Dad, could Faye and I come over and talk to you? I'd like to get your counsel. Of course, you know I'm talking about the principle of authority. How God gives protection and direction through authority. And I'll never forget my father's response. He said, what do you want my counsel for, son? You haven't listened to me since you were in high school. I said, Dad, I know, you're right. And I said, I've come to realize I've missed a lot of wise counsel as a result. He said, well, come on over. And so Faye and I drove over. We went over for dinner. And I remember we were driving across the turnpike. I remember driving that night, and I said to Faye, the more I thought about it, I said, Faye, this is not logical. This is not going to work out. I said, listen, my dad's always said to me, to all of us, there's 4 boys and 1 girl, he said to all of his children, always stay on a salary, keep a good job, don't ever go out on commission. And second, all the rest of the family lives around them in Dallas. And he said, Jim, if you ever have the chance and God would bring you back to live near us, we want you to do that. We want you all to come back, be close to the family. I said, Faye, that's what he's going to say. I said, this is not going to work. She said, well, we'll see. So we went on over for dinner and sat down. We got through eating dinner. We cleared away the dishes. And I told my father, for the first time, he had no idea of my problems. I told him how deep in debt I was. I thought he was going to have a heart attack. I thought he was going to fall out of the chair. When he finally composed himself, I said, Dad, here's my question. Would you give me counsel? How would you counsel me? Should I stay in the city and start a real estate firm, or should I come back here to Dallas and take this promotion the boss is offering here? He looked at me and he said, son, I believe the time has come for you to start your own real estate company there in Fort Worth. Well, that made me mad. And I struck the dinner table and said, Dad, why'd you say that? Haven't you always said stay on a salary and move back to Dallas the first chance you have? He said, yes, I have. But he said, son, that's what I feel like. If that you want my counsel, and your mother here agrees. Then I said, but Dad, how do I do it with all the debt I have? And I remember he said, son, that's your problem. Now, you have to work that out on your own. He said, but if you do get hungry, your mother and I will give you a hamburger now and then. And so with that great encouragement, we left. Went back to Fort Worth. You know, I realized what I was doing was humbling myself like Nebuchadnezzar, finally saying, God, I praise, extol, and honor you. Your ways are right, not mine. I said, God, I have no idea how I'm going to get set up in business. Where do I start? I don't have an office. I can't pay rent. I can't hire a secretary. I can't do anything. What do I do? God supernaturally did something that set me up in business as a direct confirmation of following His ways and His principles. And I'm going to be sharing with you next week what God did in an amazing way. And you know, as God did that and set that company up, and over the years, that's been going some 15, 16 years now, God has mightily blessed that company, but He's made it very, very clear to me that it's not my company. His blessing has absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with me. But it stands today as a tribute to Him, a tribute to His ways, that they work. He's worthy of following. And as we applied His principles, and God raised up the company, He's made it clear to each one of us in it that all He has to do, what He wants to, is blow on it, and it's gone. And that's the way God wants us to see everything that we have. We're like a Joseph. We own nothing, but manage everything for God.